Hello again. You're beginning to look a little familiar, and I probably am too. Our final forum this evening, as Mrs. Harris mentioned, we're presenting the candidates for mayor of the city of Oxnard. And the same ground rules are going to apply to this portion as they did for our previous portion. Candidates, you will have 2 minutes for an opening statement. You will then respond to 2 questions from the press, for which you will have a 1 minute. And then I will turn
community.
Mr. Quigley.
I think one of the ways you could do it is probably right through the schools, if not through your own home. And that is have a course in civics and citizenry that's going to teach children to respect elders and other people, that are not going to litter, that are not going to have graffiti, that are not going to loiter and steal. You can't teach morals in school, but you can certainly direct the way. The other thing is families themselves have to take on task by taking on a child. Sometimes it's an uncle, it's not a direct parent, but you have to host a child. So it comes from the family, but the schools can help by guiding the way.
Thank you. Mr. De La Cerda.
This is a definite problem that I've been dealt with, and I happen to have been a gang member in the past, so I definitely know what it feels to be one. And as Mr. Quigley said, it has a lot to do with the family. And a lot of families have a hard time dealing with their kids, or even have enough time, because they're working full-time and they're barely getting around with the payments. Thing is, though, is that there's not enough quality jobs out there that a lot of these families can function. And with the jobs that are out there, people end up with alcoholism, various things where the families are fall apart, and then the child has no guidance, and he goes to the street because there's not a government agency to take the time to deal with him. And apparently, what has to happen here is that they're not going to be taken care of by their parents. Who's going to take care of them? And there has to be agencies that will do that, because if they don't, they're going to go to the streets, because that's the only thing that'll take care of them.
Thank you very much. Mrs. Richardson, your question. It's Richard.
The job of mayor is largely ceremonial. Why do you want to be mayor? And do you feel that the mayoral position should wield more power than it currently does? Who shall start?
Let's have Mr. Lopez start this one.
I want to be the mayor because I believe that psychologically, even though the mayor's vote does not mean any more than any of the council members, psychologically, if you have any person come to the city, or any company or any entity come to the city, they do not look for a council member, they look for the mayor. The mayor is a spokesperson for the city. I believe that he can set the agenda, the tone for the city, and so I believe it's a much more important position. If it were not, I would be very foolish not to be running for mayor, or rather to be running for mayor. I believe psychologically it has a lot more clout.
Okay. Mr. Plisky, why do you want to be mayor?
The mayor's position does involve a great deal of pomp and circumstance and ceremonial activities, but it also requires the role of leadership. Leadership is what drives the council meetings and what gets the city moving. I believe that a strong mayor provides good leadership, will in turn provide for a better city. I believe I have the qualities of leadership and therefore would make a good mayor. That's why I'm running for mayor.
Mr. Quigley.
The disenchantment with council members by various voter groups and neighborhood councils have compelled me to run, giving representation back to the common citizenry. Complacency and tradition have had an unfortunate influence on Oxnard's voter selection, electing the same officials with undue respect. Quote, where the people possess no authority, their rights obtain no respect. I intend to stop Oxnard's history of poor investment choices, and I will focus on the needs of the established business and residential communities. The degree to which the common citizenry prevails over wealth and special interest groups will be the measure of Oxnard's progress in self-government.
Mr. De La Cerda.
The reason why I've decided to run is because the alternatives are very nim if I didn't select to, and the reason why is to also bring apart from for the majority that's not represented here, like from the 30 and under age, that there's a lot of people out there that need some real jobs. You know, we don't have those same types of jobs that pay these pensions anymore. They're not paying the same type of wages they used to. And this area hasn't really done anything to develop any types of jobs in the area. And definitely I'm going to try to do so, if selected.
Mr. Karen.
Well, as a successful businessman, I feel I have the leadership quality to turn the city around and make it a successful city. Because what's happening now, we are definitely not a successful city. We are having problems with money, and we're always successful with money, and I think that what we need is a real leader here, not just somebody to be a figurehead. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayoral candidates, I now have 7 dozen questions here that people would like to have you answer. Audience, I will attempt to give the candidate your question to whom it was addressed, but you've overwhelmingly addressed them to one candidate here, and that is, it's not going to be feasible, so I apologize in advance. Candidates, you're going to have 1 minute to answer these questions, and again, there will be a 30-second warning. And Dr. Lopez, I'll begin with you. What do you think about police harassment and brutality on our Hispanic youth, and what would you do to stop it?
That's a very, very difficult question. We have a form of a police review board. The police review board is the city council. Anytime that there is any feeling that any citizen has that they have been mistreated, they have the opportunity to file a complaint, and then that complaint is investigated fully by a staff member, by a committee, a group, which finally goes to the police chief, and then finally every member of the city council has an opportunity to look at the report, and if you feel that there is something amiss, then you have the opportunity to voice your concern. So I believe that we have a system that works. It is very difficult to address the concerns that people have when they feel that they've been mistreated.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Mr. Plisky, how can you justify increasing the city manager's salary when our city has a dangerously low police-to-citizen ratio? In fact, one of the lowest in the entire state.
Well, I think, first of all, the police-to-citizen ratio was established long before those raises were applied. I think it needs to be understood that there were all of the city employees got raises during that period of time. The city manager and the city attorney were 7 months late in getting their increases because of council action. 1 week after we finally made that decision was the first time anyone on the city council knew that we were going to come up $5 million short on our budget. Had we known that, certainly had I known that, I would never have supported those increases at that time. And if it's necessary, I would be happy to consider supporting decreases, but not just for those 2 people, but for everyone across the board.
Thank you very much. Question for you, Mr. Quigley. What would you do to get corporations to use local contractors in their projects and developments?
The contractors have to go through a process that presently entails over 17 different functions with the planning department and all the various agencies that have to get an okay from in order to develop their projects. We can institute that as part of the process. Our city needs employment. We have skilled workers here, and where we can, we should require that the percentage of their staff be resourced from the community.
Thank you. Mr. De La Cerda, what should the council do about gangs?
Definitely they have to identify them, and that's something they've neglected for the longest time. Now they're barely trying to get into it with all the hype that's been brought out with the LA riots in Hollywood. It's something that's been there for years and years. Just nobody wants to identify them, and it's about time you start. And definitely start dealing with it, because obviously everybody's been neglecting it ever since, well, I guess, zooting times. And apparently it's something that everybody's going to have to deal with, because definitely this time is a time, especially during this period, come voting time, is when you have to start deciding that we're going to have to start realizing that they're there, and definitely we have to deal with it. And definitely the only way you're going to deal with them is like you deal with anybody else. You deal with them in a human manner, because that's what all they are. They're not gangs of humans. They're just people like you and me. And they're only trying to live. They're not any different from anybody else. And they're out there just trying to get by. And opportunity's not in their way. So obviously, if they don't see opportunity, everybody wants opportunity. But if you don't see it, why aim for it?
Thank you very much. Mr. Karen, this one is addressed specifically to you. You addressed our gang problems as Hispanics, stereotyping our youth. Do you believe that our youth of today, whether they are Hispanic, black, or white, have a future in our city of Oxnard? And if so, what kind of future can they look forward to?
The reason I spoke about the Hispanics is because it was brought up at a PAB meeting, as President's Advisory Board. They were concerned that the Hispanic community did not have enough Boy Scout units. That's why I brought this up. I feel that it doesn't make any difference whether the boys are Hispanic, black, white. It doesn't really make any difference. My experience with the Boy Scouts has been that when a boy joins the Boy Scouts, he has a learning process that will benefit him when he gets to be an adult. And as an adult, he's not interested in belonging to gangs. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Dr. Lopez, as mayor, how would you help lower-income families to buy affordable housing?
It's extremely difficult. I think what we have to do, first of all, is to have the mindset. I talked earlier about having an agenda. I think that you have the mindset of the council and the mayor be in favor of affordable housing. I do not believe that that's the case right now. We had a study made that stated that a housing unit had to be worth $309,000 before it paid its way. And I feel that philosophy has infiltrated into the staff, and that has been a very, very negative thing. I think that if you can get the staff thinking that we do need it, that we have to work for it, then we can get it. There are various programs that we could utilize. There's federal and state programs that we could utilize as subsidies. We could, if we just tell the developers, this is what we want, we will get it. If we tell them we don't want it, then you can be sure that we will not get it. It's a mindset.
Thank you. Mr. Pliski, this one is addressed to you. What will you do, if elected, to increase minority senior management in the city?
I think that we'll continue with the policies that are in place today. We have equal opportunity programs set up in the city of Oxnard designed to make sure that the Hispanic people are properly represented on our staff. We have a new city manager and a new assistant city manager just recently hired who both subscribe to that philosophy. We have a council that believes in that philosophy, and I will encourage them to continue to follow that philosophy. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Quigley, question addressed to you. How do you stand on agricultural preservation, and where should additional green belts occur?
Well, there's many ways of categorizing a candidate. I was at an Oxnard Board of Realtors Political Action Committee review, and they asked me if I was pro-growth or slow growth. Proper word for me would be control growth. We have a general plan. I'd like to adhere to it. Lately, we've been violating it on all directions of the compass.
Thank you. Mr. De La Cerda, how would you deal with the homeless problem?
Definitely the homeless problem is something that's now basically being also brought into view. The homeless problem has always been there. I've talked to people at the Zoe Christian Center, and They say the only way we're ever going to solve this problem is if we have jobs. There's no jobs. These people cannot find work. If you don't have money, you can't buy a dime. You can't buy anything. And obviously, there's no jobs, like there's so many places closing. I consider Oxnard a ghost town, because I'm just amazed at how many empty places there is now. And everybody wants to leave to Mexico or somewhere else. The thing is that nobody has money in Oxnard. And apparently people they need jobs. And definitely, if you don't have money, you can't buy a thing. And what's happening here, we need to start developing jobs in the area.
Thank you. Mr. Caron, this one is addressed to you. What do you think of the privatization of the city attorney's office?
Well, I was discussing that this afternoon. I personally think that Mr. Gillick should be fired, not hire him as a private attorney, because Mr. Gillick has been a real problem in the city. He has worked out agreements with private parties that have hurt the city to a tune of, I'd say about $23 million. But the point is that I do not believe that we need privatization of the city attorney's office, because as I said, we're having problems with the city attorney right now, and that would only make it worse. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me see if I can get in one more round here. Dr. Lopez, you fought hard to bring about a Veterans Memorial. Why don't you fight as hard for affordable housing?
Well, I have been fighting for affordable housing, but when you're in the council, you have to get 3 votes, and unless you get a consensus, you just cannot get affordable housing. I can jump up and down and scream and whatever, but I'm not going to get anywhere unless I get a council that directs the staff to develop affordable housing. If we do not have that, and we certainly don't have that now, then we will never get affordable housing.
Thank you. Mr. Plisky, how can the council balance growth and at the same time maintain the quality of life of its present citizens?
Balance growth and maintain the quality of life. Good planning. I think the answer is good planning. We have a general plan that was designed when the city is built out at the year 2, or built out in the year 2000, to provide a quality of life consistent with development. If we follow that general plan with some minor modifications, I think we can accomplish it. If we build helter-skelter and ignore the general plan, that's when we get in trouble.
Thank you. Mr. Quigley, what would you do to rid the city of apathy?
Well, I'm running. 3 weeks before the final filing date, I looked at the candidates, and I said, I can do that. And all I'm doing is trying to encourage the people, the citizenry of Oxnard, to register to vote. You've got till the 5th of next month, or is it this month?
This month.
This month,
No, October.
October. And that will make the difference.
Mr. De La Cerda, how would you define affordable housing?
Definitely, it would have to fit in the budget if you have one. And definitely, like I said before, you're going to have to first obtain that budget. And the only way anybody's going to ever buy a house is if they start working. And as I said before, it's very hard to find a job in this area. And I know a lot of people that don't even work in Oxnard. It's hard to find somebody who does work in Oxnard. The thing is, though, is that we're actually the biggest city in Ventura County. We've got to start producing jobs. And one of the reasons is to start bringing and attracting business, because there's not even one committee to attract business here that's strong enough. This should be the main priority towards the city. Definitely, that should be my main priority.
And Mr. Karen, directed to you, how would you have voted on the Walmart issue and why?
I didn't understand
The
that.
Walmart issue, how would you have voted and why?
I would have voted against it because they claim that Walmart will bring in sales taxes. The point is, Walmart will put other business out of business here, and the amount of taxes we'll get from Walmart will be a lot less than a legitimate business. In other words, if you buy an item for $1 in a regular business, you get 7.25%. You buy it in Walmart, let's say for 60 cents, you only get 4 cents back. So in other words, you're losing money with the amount of business Walmart is going to be taken away from the other businesses. So as far as I'm concerned, having been a businessman, I do not think Walmart would be a plus in this area.
And go down the line, and I'd like to know, one of our questions here is, I'd like to know what you think is the most important issue, one most important issue in the city of Oxnard, and how you're going to address it in 1 minute, Mr. Lopez.
I think affordable housing is. Right now, we have the median price of a house is roughly $230,000. Probably 15% of the population in Oxnard can buy that. I stated earlier that I believe that the philosophy around here is that we need a $300,000 house. That would be about 3% probably of the population. So we would be developing, or we are developing, housing that very few people in Oxnard can afford. The argument is given that if we develop a lower cost housing, then that we will have an influx of people. But I don't believe that that is so. I believe that the housing would be utilized by current Oxnard residents who would then be paying revenue, and our net result would be that we would get more revenue than we currently do.
Mr. Plisky, the number one issue, and how do you address it?
I think there are probably 2 or 3 issues that will qualify for number 1, but I believe finances and police are really at the top. We need to generate additional revenues in the city of Oxnard, and until we are able to do that, we have to reduce our expenditures, and we cannot afford to do that in the area of police and fire protection. Until we've accomplished that, we should not be engaging in any other programs of lesser priority.
Mr. Quigley, your number one issue and the solution.
My number one issue is fiscal responsibility and reversing the decline in neighborhood appearances, protection of fixed income communities, and greater funding of city revitalization efforts. We must intelligently mix business, residential, and environmental concerns into a vibrant, affordable, secure community.
Mr. De La Cerda, the number one issue.
The number one issue is that the community must unite as a one, and not as a different instances, different areas. We're going to have to realize we're all here to survive. We're all here to raise families. We're all here. What we have to do is put people first. And definitely seems to me like a lot of these farmlands are more important than people. And to survive, you need money. And you can't say you're going to be on the streets like everybody else is developing in the homeless category, because money's getting hard to find, and we have to attract business to come to the area to provide jobs for the people in the area. Because obviously, if you don't have a pension or if you don't have anything of that nature, you might as well be start liquidating now, because it's hard times. All the companies are going to Mexico. They're leaving the state. You got to start attracting businesses to the area. And definitely, if you don't, I could see that it could get really tight. And definitely, who's going to buy a house if they don't have money? And definitely, it's going to be really tight.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Chair, on the number one issue.
The number one issue, as far as I'm concerned, is affordable housing. 2 years ago, I gave the council a plan. They ignored it. The plan goes like this. The city needs 300 acres of land to put 3,000 of manufactured homes upon. The city would charge these people rent, and the city would have a net profit of $6 million a year. That $6 million a year would cure a lot of the problems we have here in the city. After the bonds are paid off, the city would net $9 million a year. The people would buy their own manufactured homes, running between $25,000 up to $75,000. It depends on what you can afford. However, the city would benefit with the 3,000 homes almost immediately, because the acreage would be along Rice Avenue, which is now unfarmable, and the city could put in the infrastructure in 1 year at the cost of $10 million. The property, I don't know how much it would be, but when you issue bonds, it could be affordable no matter how you look at it. So the city would make a net profit after the bonds are paid off of $9 million. That would cure all our problems. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Gentlemen, the time has come to conclude our forum for mayor. I would like to now give each of you 1 minute to make a closing statement. And once again, I'd like to reverse the order of the opening question and begin with you, Mr. Cortez.
Thank you. I'd like to set and enforce neighborhood standards for appearance, occupancy, and parking privileges. Work through neighborhood councils in establishing standards for their respective communities. Stagger duty to schedules of code enforcement to include weekends and evenings to catch these culprits that are violating our codes. Increase mixed residential use and commercial zoning in downtown. Favor a fee structure to developers and contractors who improve downtown. Streamline the permit process gauntlet for investors of home improvement and neighborhood facelifts. Besides establishing linkage to the community, city projects must have realistic funding or stop. Developers must employ greater numbers of Oxnard residents in all Oxnard projects.
Thank you. Closing statement, Mr. Plessy.
I've lived in the community of Oxnard now for over 20 years. I am proud to be a resident of Oxnard. I am proud of this community. We face many problems, and one day I hope to retire, and I hope that all these problems will be gone. Naturally, they will not. But I think that we can make some heavy strides toward that end, even though we face these tough times. In order to accomplish that, we need strong leadership from the council. I believe the mayor can provide that leadership. I believe I have the qualities necessary to bring that leadership to the council. I hope that you will consider voting for me in November. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Dr. Lopez.
Yes, thank you. I think that the public here has heard all the candidates for council, as they've heard all the candidates for mayor. I think it's very clear that everyone wants the same thing. We all want jobs. We all want to be safe. We want adequate housing. We want adequate revenue to run our services, recreation, and so forth. But I think ultimately it just boils down to leadership and who can provide the leadership. I have been involved in the city for 27 years. All of it is a volunteer, and then the last 14 years as a member of the council. I have also been very involved in leadership positions in my professional society, and I have always been able to develop consensus between people, between groups, and I believe I have the ability to really bring our city together, and so that we can develop the type of city that we want and we need. And with that, thank you. And I thank the League of Women Voters also for the opportunity to voice our opinions here this evening. And I believe that this is something that will really...
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Mr. Karen, 1 minute closing statement.
Thank you. They talk about leadership. Leadership, giving away our taxpayer money to a millionaire park owner. I don't call it leadership. I call it giving away our hard-earned money. And as far as I'm concerned, that is not, to me, a sign of leadership. They talk about lack of voting. They say, well, we only have 3 votes or 2 votes, so we need a 3rd vote. In the meantime, we only have actually done a 3-man or 3-woman or 3-person city council. What we really need is 7 people on the city council and council my district. This way everybody's represented, not just a few people, like in the north end of
Well, commended for putting yourselves on the line. We need more committed people like you. And also thanks to Oxnard College for the use of the facility, to Jones Intercable providing the microphones and for the candidates and for televising the programs. And ladies and gentlemen, I want to let you know that the program is going to be rebroadcast for future viewing on Channel 19. Flyers are available outside. The mayor and council forums are going to be on Saturday, October 3rd, on Sunday, October 11th, and on Saturday, October 17th. The Oxnard School District Forum will be shown on Friday, October 23rd, Saturday, October 24th, and Sunday, October 25th. So they're doing their share to get you educated. I'd ask you to inform your